You are sitting in one of the most fascinating times in the world of HR technology that I have ever seen. I've been an analyst and a researcher and an HR consultant for about close to 20 years now, and the HR technology world is literally reinventing itself. And so what I'd like to do for the next half hour or so is introduce you to the innovations that are taking place and give you some examples of where I think you should be spending your time. And I think we're going to have time for questions about some of the material at the end. So if you see anything you're interested in, make some notes and we'll talk about it. Interestingly enough, this morning when I woke up at 3:30, I'm from California, so I did have a long trip. I noticed that yesterday Facebook introduced a technology in their product called Workplace by Facebook, which allows you to do your expense accounts online through a chatbot. That was yesterday. So the world of HR technology is changing that fast that there's that much going on that you need to keep up with. Now, let me get started with a little bit of context. Most of you know this, but virtually every company that I talk to is going through some form of business digital revolution, revolutionizing the business itself. When we did our research with MIT this year, 90% of the CEOs that were surveyed told us that their very business model is under disruption. And 70% of them told us they do not have the appropriate leadership or skills in their organization to deal with that. And a lot of that is now being called AI or robotics. Now, I've been around long enough to remember AI in the 1970s and the 1980s when it didn't work at all. And now it's basically like commodity software. You could go to any retail store in Christmas and you could buy an Amazon Echo or an Alexa machine that basically has some of the most advanced AI for really just a few dollars. Take it home and plug it into your home devices and talk to it. And our phones have AI built in, obviously, in Siri. So this is now becoming widespread in the business community, and it's changing jobs in a dramatic way. One of the most interesting applications of AI that I think you need to think about is even in farming. John Deere, which is one of the largest farm manufacturing companies in the world, now allows you to fly drones over the field, take pictures of the field. The tractors will plow the field in exactly the right spot, plant the seeds using sensors in the right place, water the seeds using humidity detectors to determine if they're getting enough water, fertilize the seeds that need fertilization, watch them grow, and then decide when they need to be picked, all by software. So that's how quickly AI has appeared on the scene. And so that's changing our world of work. But I think the more interesting issue that affects you and some of the tools that you're going to see next door is this. Whether we like it or not, technology has not made work easier. In fact, all the research that we've done, and I continue to do this on a regular basis, shows that work is actually getting harder. We are a little bit overwhelmed with the amount of information, the number of emails, the number of messages. You can see the statistics have gone up. In the United States, we did a study that said that US workers look at their phones 8 billion times a day, just in the United States. The average human being gets 150 emails a day, and you can see 40% of Americans don't even believe they can have a productive and successful career and have a great family life. So this hasn't been good. And in fact, one of the things the statistics show is we're actually taking less vacation. So this particular technology revolution, the one we're living in right now, which is often called the fourth industrial revolution, is the one with the least amount of productivity improvement we've ever seen. The invention of the steam engine, the invention of electricity, the invention of the original computers in the 1970s all resulted in greater productivity than today. And so as we talk about HR technology, I want to give you the context to just think about the fact that we are not at luxury of rolling out new tools to our employees and expecting them to use them simply because they're there. They're already overwhelmed with things to do, so we have to make technology easier and more naturally embedded into the workforce. Now, and by the way, one of the things I like to talk about is the word digital. Most people think the word digital means building an app on your phone. The way I like to think about it is digital means delivering a solution to where people are today. If you can do that with your HR technology and buy and build solutions that deliver, the right services to employees in their jobs when they need them, then you'll be successful with technology. One of the other issues before I get into the market is the issue of employee engagement, and let me just touch on that. If you look at engagement data, the engagement market, which is about $1 billion market, engagement data is not going up. In fact, Aon Hewitt did a study that came out last month that said that engagement dropped by about 7 or 8% around the world last year. And I've looked at the data from Glassdoor every 6 months, and it is not going up. And in Asia, it's not going up either. So for all the technology we're buying and all the tools and all the vendors and all the people in the next room, we're not making the workplace better. So my challenge to you as I take you through the marketplace is it's time to rethink about HR technology in a way that actually makes work better for people, doesn't just automate HR practices. And if you can do that, then you'll be wildly successful in your organization. Now, let me talk a little bit about the HR technology market. And as I do that, let me talk about what's going on in organizations. One of the things that I have the opportunity to do in Deloitte, I was just looking at the timing, that I have the opportunity to do in Deloitte is co-lead the annual report called the Deloitte Human Capital Trends. And last year, the report that came out in March, we had about 10,000 companies respond to this. And what we found is that 88% of these companies, the #1 trend is to redesign the organization itself. The hierarchical business models that we've created over the years, like this picture on the left, do not accurately reflect the way work gets done. Even though we all have those organization charts and we have these job levels and we have these job titles, work gets done in teams. And in fact, team-oriented work is becoming the new HR. Unfortunately, very few HR technologies were designed for that picture on the right. Most of them were designed for the picture on the left. Give you an example. Cisco, which has now for 2 years been trying to study the use of teams in their company, has purchased a piece of technology that allows employees to volunteer in what teams they are working on. And the head of talent at Cisco told me that they found out they have 20,000 teams at Cisco that are not reflected in the HR system anywhere. There's no information about what they are, who's on them, what their goals are, how they're going to be measured, nowhere. It doesn't exist because all of the HR technology is designed for the organization on the left. And if you think about teams and the way they work in companies, teams require people to move from place to place. They require transparency. They change the way you set goals. And this is a massive change in the way organizations operate. So we in HR have to take a leading role in helping organizations deal with this new design of the business itself and how the people practices are adapted to deal with the world of a network. Companies are a network. And that's probably the biggest change we found in the human capital trends. So let's talk about technology. Now, in my particular case, I entered the workforce in the late 1970s before we even had voicemail. In fact, there were no voicemails when I went to work. There were little pink slips. And I have watched the introduction of the mainframe computer, email, the PC, mobile phones, all of those things come. And one thing I will tell you is it is impossible to predict the implications of technology before it comes. It just does things. And if you look at the history of technology, the steam engine, no one could have predicted that it would create interstate highways and interstate commerce. No one could have predicted that the invention of electricity would eventually result in digital communications and the internet. Nobody could have predicted that the original word processor would turn into a PC, which turned into a laptop, which turned into a tablet, which turned into a mobile phone. No one could have predicted that the mobile phone, which was, I don't even know why I would call it a phone, because it isn't really used as a phone, it's really used as a mobile device, would turn into a tool for hailing a car, for buying things, for doing digital learning. No one could have predicted that. Mobile, I think the world of wearables is yet to emerge. I can't predict where that's going to go, but I would not be surprised if a few years from now we are wearing technology fabric within our clothes. We now have smart badges that are so smart they can listen to your voice and determine if you're under stress And companies like Deloitte and Hitachi and other companies have actually used these technologies to study their workforce and identify why there's high engagement or low engagement in different parts of the organization. And then, of course, we have this new world of virtual reality, which companies like Facebook have put billions of dollars into. In the last 2 years, we've seen Watson and AI, we've seen consumer brand AI, and tools like Snapchat, which I don't know if most of you are aware of it, but I have 2 kids in their 20s, and they don't even use Facebook, and they don't even use Instagram, they use Snapchat. So we can't predict where this is all going to go. And my point is that your job and our job in HR is not to necessarily be on the bleeding edge and necessarily implement all these things, but pay attention to them because they change the way we work. And I believe that the reason we have this productivity gap, one of the reasons we have this global productivity gap, which has resulted in income inequality, political unrest, and all sorts of issues around the world, is because the technology that we are being sold, oftentimes by companies that make money based on advertising, is not necessarily improving the workplace. And issues like wellness and well-being and employee engagement are our responsibility. And so I would warn you to look at technology carefully and make sure the technology that you're implementing in your company actually does drive value. And let me make one point about this whole future of work and AI. There's 1 million articles on AI and all the jobs that are being displaced by automation, and we talked about it last night in the session that was here. It is not resulting in the elimination of jobs. It is resulting in new jobs. It is changing the nature of work. It is creating more human jobs. It is taking jobs that are more task-oriented and turning them into more hybrid or multifaceted or renaissance types of jobs. And one of the things our research found is that while 40 to 50% of companies are rapidly implementing huge amounts of technology, robotics, automation, AI in their organizations, 75% of them are not working with their HR teams to redesign the work around the technology. And so I think a lot of your job in the future will be to spend more time with the operational groups in your companies that are implementing some of these new tools and help them understand what should the job model look like, how should people be retrained, and what are the skills we're going to need into the future. Now let's talk about technology markets for a couple of minutes. And I'm going through 7 topics to give you a sense of what's going on and really just highlight some of the disruptions, and then we talk about some questions. Number 1, the core HR technology market. Now, you know, you cannot run a company without a payroll system of some kind, even if you do it by paper. And so every organization of any size has to have a core HR system. And these used to be little PC-based tools, then they were pieces of software that cost millions of dollars, and now they're cloud-based systems. The core HR technology market has become so disrupted and so exciting, it is one of the fastest growing areas of venture capital. You can see from this data, in the last 3 years, almost $6 billion was invested in venture-based new HR technology. Because we are going through a pretty much a reinvention of everything. If your company is more than 10 years old, even less than that, I would be willing to guess you're sitting on some HR technology that doesn't look so great anymore, only in the last decade. Now, in the core HR market, which we're going to talk about, I think, with Stacy in a panel tomorrow, there has been a pretty major shift away from tools that really run the core HR systems and the payroll system toward tools that help employees get their jobs done. Moving from core systems to apps, moving to focus on well-being and feedback, new generation of performance management tools, more agile learning tools, all of which have pretty much caught the technology marketplace kind of flat-footed. Most of the companies that we bought technology from only 5 to 10 years ago are really struggling to keep up with some of the new innovations that are coming out of the new cloud-based vendors. And the essential change is we've gone from this idea of integrated talent management, and we pretty much wrote the book on that around 2007 or 2008, to what I like to think of as people management. The idea of talent management was we were going to have technology that basically managed an employee from their original day they came to work for us all the way through their career in our company until they retire. Guess what? People don't work in one company their whole career anymore. In fact, 50% of millennials will live past the age of 100. And the average S&P 500 company only lasts 15 years on the S&P 500. So we're not going to have employees with us for their entire career. In some cases we will, but not in most cases. So while they're here, we need technology that makes them productive, that gets them connected to other people, that gets them engaged, and gets them the information and tools they need to do their jobs now. We don't have the luxury of building an end-to-end talent management practice. So those days have ended. And what that's resulted in is a huge market of new tools. If you look at all of the products that have been introduced in the HR technology market in the last 4 or 5 years, they started as process automation tools. Back in the days, we bought things like PeopleSoft to automate core HR. Then they moved into employee integrated talent management tools. And if you remember, almost all the standalone learning, recruiting, talent products got merged together into integrated talent management systems. Then we went to this world of what we called systems of engagement. And in fact, Workday, one of the reasons so many companies have bought Workday in the last decade is simply because it's easier to use. But whether the technology is better or not, people look at it and say, wow, that's something I think I actually could use. And so it's more engaged, more engaging, and most companies now select technology based on ease of use. In fact, one of the largest entertainment companies in the world just did an RFP for new HR technology, and they didn't look at the core feature set at all. They gave access to the technology to 200 of their line managers, and they let them use it. And then they asked them at the end of about a month, which one of these systems would you actually use if we bought it? And then they made their decision based on that. And now we're moving to an era where the technology actually has to help us get our work done. So you can see, in only the last 10 or 15 years, the HR technology market has moved from a market of automation tools that automate things for the HR professional to tools that actually help employees get their work done. That's a big change. That's a lot of change that's happened. So as you look at the tools that you're going to be buying over the next couple of years, they're going to be on the right side of this picture, and you're going to be looking at tools that are going to be directly employee-facing. Now, interestingly enough, there still is a huge amount of rip and replace of old technology going on. The research that Stacey Harris does, and I know she's going to be speaking to you a little bit later in the conference, shows that a very high percentage of companies have replaced their HR technology. Here in India, it's a little bit less than around the world, and I think some of this has to do with budgets and the fact that some of you are in organizations that don't have as much money to replace with these cloud systems. These cloud systems are not inexpensive, by the way. You end up moving your core spending from capital to expense. You used to be able to buy the software and then write it off over many years. Now you're paying for it month after month after month. So it's actually not clear that it's cheaper, but you do get better technology and it's more up to date. And what you find when you look at the core technology market is that while many, many companies and virtually everyone will probably move to the cloud over time, the growth is no longer in the core technology of HR. The growth is in areas like learning and career management and some of the bigger problems companies have. In fact, I just had a meeting right before the conference with an executive from a large global bank, and one of their biggest issues is learning technology and learning software. So the sort of the center of gravity is moving to more of the talent-related applications again. One of the other disruptions that's taking place is the reinvention of the corporate communication systems that we have. Now, in the last couple of months, I've been to Slack, I've been to Google, I've been to Workplace, I've been to Facebook, I've been to Microsoft, and I've looked at their new tools. And I have to tell you, your IT departments are getting flooded with sales reps trying to sell them new stuff right now. And sometime in the next year or two, most of our organizations are going to be transformed by a whole different set of infrastructure tools on how we communicate and get work done. And those tools are more like messaging systems and less like email systems. Email is about a 25-year-old paradigm. So as I mentioned earlier today, the idea of delivering HR through email is going to slowly go away, and it's going to be delivered through a chatbot or a message that will appear on your phone, where you'll actually be talking to the HR software, and it'll be asking you, did you submit your expense account? And you'll say yes, and you'll upload it to the phone, and then it'll come back to you and say, wait a minute, you forgot to give me the receipt for this restaurant, and you go back and send it back. This is coming, like now. And most of the HR technology that we're buying hasn't even implemented that yet. So I would challenge you to spend a little bit of time with your IT department and look at what their plans are for these new workplace systems, because they could have a direct impact on what you do in your HR technology strategy. The second thing I want to talk about is the new generation of tools that are coming. If you look at the problems companies have today, flatter organizations, people working in teams, employee engagement relatively flat to declining, people wanting to be more connected around the world but spend less time on the phone or less time on planes, there's a whole new generation of tools that are being developed. There must be 50 companies, in fact, I think there's more than 100 companies now that are selling pulse survey tools so that your employees and managers can get real-time feedback from their workforce and their teams on a regular basis. Tools to measure sentiment of people. Tools to look at wellness and give people coaching on health and wellness and well-being. These are the new generation of tools that are being built to complement all of the core HR technology that we've had for the last decade. And so the center of gravity is moving to the employee and away from core HR. Now, I'm not saying core HR technology is going away either. We still have to design an intelligent platform behind the scenes that provides HR services to employees at the lowest possible cost. And if you don't do that, unfortunately, you don't get to do any of this other stuff because you're too busy just dealing with employee issues all the time. So I think the world of HR now has become, commodity-like in the core and very high value add in some of these edge applications. And that's really where I think you're going to be spending your time in the future. Now, I happen to have, the opportunity to talk to many, many of the startups in this market. And most of these companies are companies that were founded 5 years ago or less, many of them are even less, that are growing at 100 to 200 to 300% per year. And I'm not even including all the companies that were founded in India. There must be another 24 that are founded here by entrepreneurs here in India. These are the generation of tools that you're going to be spending your time on in the future as you get your core HR systems in place. And I think one of the things that's going to happen, to give you a sense of where the market's going, is today, just like it happened in talent management, where all the talent management tools were integrated together into an integrated talent management platform, tools for feedback, goal management, wellness, well-being, learning on demand are going to be coming together into a single app that employees will have to help them get work done. Today, companies like Deutsche Telekom and RBC and other relatively well-funded organizations have built integrated employee apps that take all of these functional areas and put them in the hands of an employee. And when you do that, you will see a transformational change in their activity level and their engagement with your systems, but also make your HR professionals' jobs tremendously easier. Because so many of the things that we do in HR have to do with helping employees deal with these exact applications. So this is a big trend in the market. The third area I want to talk about is performance management. Now, in the research we did in the Human Capital Trends this year, close to 76% in that ballpark of companies told us that they are re-engineering, planning on re-engineering, or recently re-engineered their performance management process. And a lot of the debate about performance management in the early days was the idea of getting rid of performance ratings. Well, that's not really what happened. What really happened was we realized that an annual once-a-year review simply wasn't working. And part of the reason for that is management philosophies have changed. I won't walk you through the details of this chart. You can look at it, later. But basically, if you look at the last 2 decades of management thinking, we've moved from the GE, Jack Welch, top-down, hierarchical approach to management to much more of an approach of empowerment and facilitation and coaching of people. And in the process of doing that, in creating more agile organizations with more team-centric management practices, we needed to create a performance management process that was continuous, not once a year. The funny thing about performance management, and this is what it looks like. This is one of the prototypes developed by GE. The funny thing about performance management, when we studied it 2 years ago, or maybe it was 2.5 years ago, we asked companies to tell us how they like their performance management process, how much time they're putting into it. 86% of companies told us that it is not even worth the time they're putting into it. Not that it isn't adding value, but it's actually a waste of time. I mean, I've talked to companies that told me the entire month of December is lost for people running around working on their performance appraisals, trying to figure out what they're going to do to give people a raise or not give them a raise at the end of the year. So this is a massive, massive change that's happened in a very short period of time. It's not about eliminating ratings. It's about creating a continuous, agile process for communication with people. Let's face it, good performance management is good management, and good management is a continuous dialogue between employees and their coach and their leaders and their team leaders on what's going on at work and what's important and what's not, and what's working and what's not working. And that has to happen on a regular basis. This is an example of what one of the pioneers in performance management, Juniper Networks, did when they reinvented their process, and they did away with ratings, and they replaced it with a 4-level approach to evaluation. Are you hitting your numbers? Are you developing your skills? Are you developing a career plan? And are you connecting yourself to other people in the organization? Those are the criteria of success in modern organizations today, not the one number you get at the end of the year arbitrarily created by your manager. At Deloitte, we've now been doing this for 2 years. And at Deloitte, all over the world, this is pretty much in every country now, you have a quarterly check-in process where you as a consultant or as a leader check in with the system, and the system asks you some very carefully selected questions that are shown up here. And based on the answers to those questions, we can tell if the team is engaged, if the leader is doing his or her job, and if the employees are doing their job. And we've correlated the results of these 8 questions to the financial performance of these teams, and it's directly correlated. So this is a predictor and a coach and evaluator of performance that does not involve arbitrary ratings. And the more frequently you do performance management in this continuous process, the better data you get. And at the end of the year, when it's time to decide how much money somebody gets, the decision is much easier, much more accurate, much more data-driven, and much less focused on bias and other forms of judgment. We've studied performance management all over the world. We've done case studies on this in the Bersin library. Everybody who's done this has told us it's had tremendous positive improvements, virtually every company we've talked to. The only problem, I would say, is that the technology's not there yet. If you want to implement continuous performance management today, you're probably going to have to buy it from a small company. Even Oracle and Workday have yet to implement this kind of solution. SuccessFactors actually has something. But this is a whole new market that's really caught a lot of the HR technology vendors by surprise. And so it's one where you're probably going to be looking around for tools that have yet to mature over the next couple of years. The next one I want to talk about briefly is this idea of engagement. Last year's Human Capital Trends and the year before, we found that the #1 and #2 trend was culture, was building a better culture. And the reason that culture is so important in organizations today is there's a lot of reasons. First of all, we have a huge generational diversity in organizations, 5 generations of people working together. We have highly diverse organizations operating around the world. And millennials, more than anybody else, are very focused on citizenship, meaning, and purpose at work. Those people my age, I entered the workforce in the 1970s, we went to work in the days when you joined a big company and you kind of stayed there for a while, and you stayed there your whole career, and you expected that company to take care of you. Today, organizations aren't like that. And people entering the workforce in your companies today want to feel that they're getting feedback, that they're giving feedback, that the organization has purpose and meaning, and we haven't necessarily built the right technologies to improve that. And this is the picture I like to use to try to give you a sense of how far we've come. Think about this. What we've basically designed in HR is a process where once per year, we're going to tell you how good a job you're doing. It's at the end of the year, and it's usually a surprise from your manager. One company that I talked to calls it a drive-by shooting at the end of the year when you get your performance appraisal. And once per year, we're going to send you a survey to ask you what you think of the company, the engagement survey, which has absolutely no relevance to the way work gets done anymore. Things are happening too fast, there's too much going on, and I really think both of those practices have been completely disrupted. The engagement marketplace, which as I mentioned is about $1 billion market, is filled with vendors that sell annual surveys based on normative databases, many of whom have not changed the surveys for many, many years. Those are becoming much less useful. In fact, I would venture to say that in most organizations, they're probably going to become worthless. And so we need a way to gain continuous feedback on a regular basis. And so the HR technology market has evolved, and there is an enormous wealth of new solutions that will allow you to create goals, transparent goals online, give people feedback, get developmental feedback from your peers, get anonymous feedback from people in the organization, and give open feedback to the organization on any issue that you see as a worker. Most of the operational problems your company has are well known to the employees. The employees know if there's a safety problem. The employees know if there's an operational problem. The employees know if we're not taking good care of customers. But I mean, obviously we had the United Airlines thing last week. But do they have any place to talk about it? Do they have anybody to tell? Is there a system or an environment or a culture that allows people to speak up? In most organizations, there isn't. And these tools are freeing up, they're unleashing this incredible voice we have in organizations for employees to tell us what we can do to make the organization better. And that's going to be a transformational change in HR. We now call it the employee experience. And the new world of HR is really about understanding and analyzing the employee experience throughout the company at all levels and understanding what it means to everyone. Part of the employee experience is giving people the right environment at work so they can be healthy and productive and feel comfortable that they're getting their job done. Now, I don't know what it's like where you work, but I work for a consulting firm right now, which is a pretty busy place. And we have a problem with people getting burned out. It's just natural part of life in consulting. The only way to prevent that is for us in HR to take a careful look at the work environment and start to do things that make the environment healthier and more productive at a human level. And I think what's going to happen now, and this is starting to take place in the technology world, you'll see vendors now doing this, is the idea of health and safety and wellness, which used to be run for the most part by the Comp and Ben department, oftentimes invested in to reduce insurance costs, is now becoming part of your strategy for business performance. Because if people are tired, if they're stressed out, if they're having a fight with their family because they're traveling too much, if they're doing emails all weekend, if they can't keep up with the pace, they're not being productive, they're not creating an organization that's working for you as a company. And that's going to be a big part of our world going forward. And there are new technologies entering the market now, usually in the form of apps, that allow employees to gauge their wellness and give them hints and tips and suggestions on what they can do to make their work life better. The fifth area I want to talk about is learning, which is where I started my career in this whole industry. And it's becoming, again, very, very hot. It kind of went through a sort of a dull zone for a few years, but it's really hot now. One of the reasons it's so hot, and it's the #2 trend around the world in the human capital trends, one of the reasons it's so hot is that every employee in your company is now waking up to the fact that if they are not developing themselves in their career, they are falling behind. And so they're expecting you as an organization to give them an environment where they can learn, not only in the current job so they can do their current job well, but in their whatever chosen profession is and in their career. And Glassdoor data, if you look at the Glassdoor data on companies that recommend their employees, their organizations as a place to work, the most highly correlated factor that correlates to whether an employee will recommend your company as a place to work is there a career future for me in this company? So we need to figure out how to do this. Now, unfortunately, right now, the L&D profession is a little bit broken. And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean we've fallen behind. The technology that we bought over the last decade for learning management has not kept up. We're going to publish a research report in May called the High Impact Learning Organization. It's the 5th time we've done it. And we did a net promoter score on L&D, and we asked about 1,000 companies to rate their L&D departments. And the net promoter score, if you know what net promoter is, it's how well you would recommend this to your peers, is -8. -8 is about the same level that you would recommend the Internal Revenue Service in the United States, if you know what that is. I don't know what it's called in India. So we've got some issues in the L&D industry. At the same time that's going on, there's incredible amounts of content on the public internet. You can find courses and content on everything. Anyone who is ever an expert at anything has built a course, put it online, and a lot of them are free. So your employees are basically going home and they're finding things they can learn at home, and then they're coming to the office and they're finding nothing, or they're finding old stuff that's impossible to use, and maybe they can't find it at all. So we need to fix that. Now, one of the reasons that this has happened is the technology of learning has radically changed in a very short period of time. I won't walk you through all the data on this chart, but basically what it's showing is that in a little bit more than a decade, we've gone from very simplistic, page-turning online learning that was in a Netscape browser at the time, running in Flash, to interactive video and micro-learning that's available anytime, anywhere, produced by anyone in your company, not just experts, but peers. And a new generation of tools, and I know the folks of EdCast are right here in the front, is now being unleashed and essentially to make this easier. Unfortunately, a lot of the old tools we have just weren't designed for this. The world of learning today is a combination of what I call micro-learning, which is little tiny things. I want to learn something right now. I have 5 minutes. I want to learn how to do something in my job. I want to find some video or something to help me. And macro-learning. 1-day, 2-day, 3-day courses that teach me things that are going to take me, to sort of a new level of performance in my career. And we need to figure out how to do both. And if you look at the pattern of employees at work, early in their job, they need learning to get up the learning curve, to get started. And then later, as they get going, they find that they plateau, and they may not, learn as much for a while, and they need to learn something new. And maybe they need to get promoted, or maybe they need a new assignment. The new world of learning is our opportunity to interject micro and macro learning at different parts of an employee's journey in their job based on their needs as an individual. Now, that's not what learning management systems were designed to do. I hate to tell you this. Those pieces of software are not even close to being able to do this. So there's a new generation of tools that are making this available, and I think these are going to revolutionize the learning industry. Let me give you an example of one of the pioneers on this. GE invested in a whole infrastructure to reinvent learning at GE, and they are using a new set of tools, and this is their sort of visual architecture of it, to reinvent something they call Brilliant You at GE. Anyone in GE can publish any content into this network. It's available on a mobile phone. You can rate or rank content. You can suggest it to other people. You can take courses. They have changed their contract relationships with all of their content providers, so they're now paying for content by the use, so they don't have to buy a gigantic license to all of this content which nobody wants to use. And they've built a new infrastructure to do this. Is there a learning management system? Yes, it's there, but it's kind of down in the corner at the bottom of the basement to track the formal compliance training. It isn't the center of learning anymore. So the learning of today and the learning of the future is moving away from the LMS to a focus on learning experience systems, access to content in a micro basis and a macro basis, and new systems to create AI-based learning as well. If you can get your head wrapped around the idea of micro-learning and harnessing all the content you have in your company and on the internet, then suddenly it becomes absolutely clear that AI and recommendations and data-driven learning is going to be next, and that's what's coming. Most of the platforms, learning experience platforms you can buy today, have AI-based software that will recommend things that you need to see next or do next in your job. And that's the holy grail of learning that learning management system vendors were never able to do. Sixth topic I want to touch on is analytics. And let me just spend a minute on this, because we've got about 5 minutes left. You know, I'm an engineer. I got into HR kind of by accident. So I actually worked in database for a while. And I've been watching the topic of analytics get debated and discussed in HR for about 10 years. And it's been an interesting time, and we've all talked about it, and we've all explained why it's so difficult, because we have back-end systems that aren't connected to each other, and we have unclean data, and we have a lot to do. It's here. It's finally happening. All these years after talking about analytics, it's now beginning to take place. And the reason it's taking off is because the core technology that you can buy today from Oracle, SAP, Workday, or whatever vendor, Cornerstone, allows you to build an integrated database out of the box, and you can suddenly look at solutions and gain information about your workforce you could never get before. Added to that is the opportunity to apply intelligent analytics to predict things that you couldn't see before. Now, in the research we just did in the human capital trends, the real trend in analytics is not hiring statisticians to do predictive models. We went through that, and that's kind of come and gone. It's really getting data in the hands of line managers. So your job in analytics is not necessarily to build a little group of PhDs that want to study all the data in your company, but rather to take the data you have and use technology to put it in the hands of hiring managers, line managers, business leaders, so they can look at their organization and see where engagement is low, see where there's turnover problems, see where there's work grievances, see where there's things going on in the company, and they can act on it, not us. And that's where analytics is going. We did research on this, and we're publishing a new version of this maturity model this year. And we've seen a steady increase in the amount of predictive analytics taking place. But I don't think that's really what's happening. I think what's really happening is we're moving to a world of a much expanded view of what analytics is. If you go back to the very beginning of my talk and I explained what's going on in technology, you now have access to vast amounts of information about your workforce. Metadata from their emails, organizational data, feedback from the pulse surveys, sentiment analysis of information they're giving you in the surveys. All that information is going to go into analytics. And if you haven't built the expertise and the team to manage that data, you're not going to be able to use it. So analytics is now becoming mission critical. Some of the technologies in analytics that are exciting are, I'll just mention a couple. Analysis of interviews and videos. 60% of companies in the United States now use video interviews, self-authored videos by candidates to apply for a job. You take the interview on your phone and then you submit it as part of your job application. There's now software that will actually look at those videos and determine if you might not be telling the truth based on your facial expressions on those videos. Organizational network analysis. If you haven't looked into this, you really should. If you want to know how your organization works and why one part of it's productive and one part of it's not, why we have safety problems in this part of the company and not part of that part of the company, why we have fraud or other problems in the organization, it's in the network. And there are now tools you can buy that will actually gain information through either email metadata or surveys where information is flowing, who's talking to who, and who's on what team. That's what the Cisco folks are doing right now. This will become part of analytics. And finally, there are now tools that can actually read job descriptions, look at data in the public internet, and determine if you're biased in your hiring, if you have non-inclusive practices, if you have bias in your pay practices. It will determine skills of candidates based on their profiles on social networks. This is what's going on in analytics. So my recommendation on analytics is make sure you have a team that's ready to deal with the data you have, because the technology in analytics has suddenly matured at an incredible rate, and it's now able to solve very industrial applications in business. The final 2 points I want to make as I wrap up, or really the last one, is this one. None of this technology does anybody any good if people can't use it. And so underlying all of this is the issue of really using tools like design thinking to understand how employees get their jobs done and where they need help. Now, in the Human Capital Trends study we just published, one of the big chapters is on this topic of the employee experience. Most of us don't have a very good sense of what the entire experience looks like around the world. You can see from this data that of the 10,000 companies or so responded, most of them feel like they're not exactly sure, what's going on in different parts of the organization. In order to use technology well, in order to select technology well, in order to make sure that it's adopted well, you have to focus on the end-to-end employee experience. That means implementing things like design thinking. Now, design thinking, which has actually become kind of a pretty popular thing in HR, the core of the design thinking is empathy, paying attention to and listening to employees and really understanding what's going on in their daily life at work. And when you do that, you can build personas of the different workforces or the different teams or the different work groups in your organization. And you'll find out that the employee experience of a new hire their first year in a branch bank is completely different than the employee experience of somebody in their 40s or 50s, a mid-level manager who works in IT. They don't need the same things. They're not looking for the same benefits. They're not looking for the same experience at work. Their needs for flexibility are completely different. And so we need to study this. And the issue of employee experience is becoming, I think, core to technology. Most of the vendors in the next room would be happy to sell you their tools regardless of what you're going to do with it. That's their job. That's how they make money. Your job is to understand the true employee needs in your organization, so as you're out there selecting and curating the technology that you buy, it does in fact fit into the workforce in your company. And that is what's going on in design thinking. We've been looking at this for a few years, and the organizations that do this are finding their technology can have dramatic breakthrough effects. RBC, a bank in Canada that I just interviewed a couple weeks ago, told me they looked at all of the things going on in their company, and they realized that one of the biggest challenges they have is the productivity and turnover of their first-year branch employees. Because the first year you come into a branch, you're relatively young. Sometimes it's your first job out of college. You have a lot to learn. There's compliance, there's safety, there's systems, there's business practices. And they had about a 40% turnover rate. They studied all of the experiences that happened the first year of a branch staff employee and looked at all the things they needed to learn and built a mobile app with the help of a vendor that now steps those employees through their first year experience with the coaching, the development, the training, the certification, all the things they need, the connections they need to make. And they dramatically improved the retention rate and the performance of those people. Once they rolled that out, they then learned things about those people that helped them better assess the candidates that they're recruiting into those jobs. So then they could move it into the recruiting part of their function, of their business, and do a better job of finding the people that are going to most likely to succeed. This is a party that was conducted at a branch at a telecommunications company in Australia that rolled out a new mobile app designed around the employee experience in their company that was so successful that 60,000 employees used it the first week that it was turned on. So my message to you in the end here is that despite all of the disruptions going on in technology, none of it's going to be any good if you don't understand what's going on in your employee base and what their needs are and what's going to make their work life better. So let me sort of wrap it up with that and just sort of summarize that the HR technology market is in fact reinventing itself. It's reinventing itself around digital experiences that meet people where they are at work. It's reinventing itself around data-driven and AI-driven solutions that are much more intelligent than ever before. Obviously around the cloud, new models of learning, new models and technologies for recruiting, and an intense change in the way we listen to people, create agile tools for goal management and feedback, and create performance management that actually works and drives performance in organizations. So I want to thank SHRM for inviting me to come to this conference. Thank you.